some of my favorite films are able to capture the feeling of like teenage, the first love, your first kiss, the first time you tried something big and did it. Like there's a line that Ellen Galinsky, a psychologist, makes in the film. People make movies to try to recreate the big feelings of teenagedom, and so that's an incredible time to be alive.
Tiffany Shlain is a visionary force, a boundary-pushing artist, storyteller, and thinker who weaves together feminism, technology, philosophy, and nature to illuminate the world in new ways. Honored as one of the women shaping the 21st century, she has left her mark across disciplines, from founding the Webby Awards to crafting Emmy-nominated films and best-selling books. Her art speaks to the soul, whether through the poetic rings of dendrofeminology, standing as a testament to women's history, or through her cinematic explorations of the human mind and society. With exhibitions from the MoMA to the National Mall and accolades from the Albert Einstein Foundation to NPR, her work challenges, inspires, and redefines what's possible. Through film, sculpture, writing, and public speaking, Shlain invites us to take a step back, reflect, and reconnect with ourselves, with each other, and with the world. Her lifelong pursuit of meaning and connection is more than a body of work. It's a call to wake up, engage, and imagine a better future. Hey, y'all. Let's go there. Tiffany Shlain, thank you so much for coming on. I have to be honest. Typically, I would start with how we know one another and provide that context to our audience. But I have to tell you, I'm extremely emotional on the heels of watching several of your short films. And there was one in particular that left me weeping. And that is a declaration of interdependence. And if I could pick a promo for this podcast, and the whole reason we're doing it, it's that short film. And it just affected me profoundly.
Oh,
and moved me profoundly.
Thank you. Well, that means a lot to me. We just re-released it this week, and I made that film in 2011. And it's a rewriting of the Declaration of Independence as a Declaration of Interdependence. And, we invited people on MLK Day, which also happened to be Inauguration Day, to watch that film, to remember what connects us. I also updated some other films that are really speaking to this moment with feminist history, and also speaking to this moment of how you spend your days is how you spend your life, and how to be intentional with wherever you are on the spectrum of political beliefs. But I always like to think that the word movie, which people don't really think of because they just call it that, but it's the goal of artists is to move people, to have ideas that reach people, to move them to feel something, to take action, to see a different perspective. So your reaction was all I could have hoped for. And it really means a lot to me. And actually, it's interesting because I know you didn't say how we originally met, but we are both part of the Aspen Institute Fellowship. And I would say that film and 30,000 Days really explored a lot of the teachings that I reread. And for those of you that don't know, it's an incredible fellowship that allows you and invites you to reread texts you probably read in college, but you didn't really grasp the depth of them because you were too young, and invites you mid-career or inflection point to reread the great philosophers and thinkers and recontextualize it as someone that's been out in the world doing things.
Totally. I mean, a Declaration of Interdependence has Ubuntu written all over it.
Oh, yeah.
I saw the Good Society emerging from 30,000 Days. I definitely saw the influence of the fellowship, and I was going to ask you about it. So, but to that end, let's tell the audience how we met.
Okay,
we met on Discord.
Okay. Well, because actually, I'd be curious how you would say we met, because I was very distinct for me, but
okay, tell me.
It was the 25-year anniversary of the fellowship, but we had never met. We're not in the same class, but there was a reunion that brought all the classes together in Chicago. And it was this wonderful event. It was very noisy. People were dancing. And we somehow struck a conversation, you and your husband, who was so wonderful, at the bar. And you're like, what do you do? And I was like, I'm an artist. And you're like, well, what do you do? And I was trying to describe it, and it was so noisy. And again, as like a filmmaker and visual artist, sometimes an image can just, and I was like, and it was so noisy. And I just kind of I had a postcard image in my purse of an artwork that I had just finished. And I just kind of pulled it out to be the visual because it was too noisy to speak. And your reaction, you were just like, I want that.
I was going to say those exact words. I remember it exactly the same way. I said, I want that. That was my first reaction.
That was like so wonderful. But like, I don't even think we had each other's names, and it was like this cacophony of noise. And I'm like, I love that your reaction was that.
And guess what?
She's got it.
Sitting in my house. Maybe not the real deal, but a print of it nonetheless.
Yeah, it was, and it's a feminist history tree ring, which for the last like 4 years I've been reimagining what trees have witnessed and redoing historical timelines from alternative perspectives. It's a feminist history tree ring, and you're such a trailblazer that it was like the perfect. It both made me so happy that was your reaction, and then the more I got to know you, and I'm like so happy it's in your home, and yeah, it was just beautiful, and then we've gotten to know each other. And I think one thing that's really interesting, like I was never in a sorority. I'm not a joiner by any means, but the fellowship is an interesting thing because I already immediately knew that you're interested in thinking about philosophical ideas, and you've probably done some really big things in the world, and you're an inquisitive person. So, yeah. And then, whenever I meet a fabulous woman, I mean, I'm in my 50s now, and it just feels like such a gift. I have a teenage daughter right now, and that's a period where there's just so much insecurity and like unknownness of what you're going to be, what you want to be. There's such a disparity on what you want and who you are and what you think. And I think women in their 50s and beyond, it's just such a wonderful stage of life to connect with another woman because, when you're a teenage girl, your girlfriends are everything, right?
Totally.
And then when you're at this phase, it's like this, it's just such a beautiful gift when you make a new friend at this age. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I mean, I was attracted to you from the red lipstick. I mean, it was like, oh. And I had such a visceral response to the piece without even knowing what it was about.
Oh, because maybe you didn't even hear it at that point.
No. But once I learned what it was about, then I was like serious. Like I think I stalked you for a bit, and I was sending you like text messages saying, no, Tiffany, I'm serious. I want that piece. And you were like, slow your roll. And I have plans for that particular piece, but don't worry, we can get you something. But so let's spend some time talking about that piece because I think it gives tremendous insight into who you are and the type of work that you do. So the piece we're referencing is, and tell me if I'm pronouncing this correctly, it's dendrofeminology.
Exactly correct. And it's a word that I made up, but it's drawn from the science of tree ring dating, which is called dendrochronology. Dendro means tree. Chronology is time. Ology, study of. So this is dendrofeminology, and I grew up near Muir Woods, near the big trees. I'm a total feminist, have feminist parents, married to a feminist. He's a great guy who had a strong mother and 2 sisters, so he likes a strong woman. We have 2 daughters, and I was always, throughout my life, I went to this entrance of Muir Woods, and there was this big tree ring slice with the history of the world that tree has lived, and it was like very patriarchal, very colonialist, nothing spoke to me. I don't think there's one woman mentioned on there. And at the beginning of the pandemic, I had, I've been a film director for 25 years. First I founded the Webby Awards, then I returned to filmmaking and, making films. And then right before the pandemic, I started doing what I called spoken cinema, which like live performance films. And then the pandemic happened, and like everyone, I was like, well, maybe I'm not doing that. Maybe I'm not going to be in theaters. Maybe I'm not going to live. Who knows what's happening? I started spending a lot of time in the woods, thinking about trees, what they had witnessed. And again, was confronted with this tree ring that had always gobsmacked me as a child. And what an interesting way to think about time. And then it just like hit me. I must make a feminist history tree ring. Like, I want to see that. I want my daughters to see that. I want everyone to see that version of history. So, I had never done something like that. And so it was a lot of learning and experimenting and hanging out with a lot of salvage wood people. And then I learned pyrography, which is the ancient art of burning text with a fire tip pen. And I made, it was for my first art exhibit called Human Nature. And that was one of about 6 tree rings interpreting everything from climate change to my own life to feminist history. And then it was installed in the National Mall, which was really exciting as a big feminist activation, November 2023. And then it was
in front of a giant phallic symbol, no less.
Right in front of the big phallic symbol of the Washington, a monument. And there was a big convening there for the Equal Rights Amendment and a march. And then right before the election, it was in Madison Square Park, and it was at my gallery, Nancy Hoffman Gallery in New York. And then that print, I donated a version of the print for Artists for Kamala, which was a big art auction, and that is when you got it.
Yeah, and that was
But
my
it's
first
really
big. The cool part about that is it was acquiring the piece that I coveted for so long, and it was my first big political donation.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I love that.
It was monumental on multiple fronts.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I love that. And I think, as the tree ring shows, even though we did not, first of all, I like to lift up this fact for all your listeners, is that if you looked at voting humans in the United States, 48% of the voting population voted for Harris, 48%, and 49% voted for Trump. That is a very close election. We didn't win, and I accept that, but it's not a landslide or a mandate. It's a very divided country that has an electoral college system that makes it look much different than it really is. So I think that fact is important, because if you look at history, I go back 50,000 years in feminist history, and I actually start when almost every ancient civilization, goddesses are women and worshipped. And we weren't all in patriarchal societies. And I kind of track the movement forward, backwards, some anomalies of women in power, the witch burnings, the women getting the right to vote, and all the moments. And at the end, when it was on the National Mall, I burned on there today as an invitation and a question to think about, like, what we do is going to affect what's on there next. But we are moving forward. I know it doesn't feel that way right now, but all of my films and my artwork always go back in time or space. Like, if you watch any of my films, they usually always start with a shot of the earth or some kind of historical timeline to ground you philosophically in space and time to understand how far we've come.
What I love about the piece is it's grounded in the reality of the ebbs and flow of the power of women over the course of history. So as you noted, women being in positions of power and being shamans and healers, to suddenly losing rights, and then making this progress and then taking one step forward, 2 steps back. But not unlike your films, the piece is grounded in reality. It has this through line of hope and optimism. And that last, and look, I'm sure you intended to fill it in, but that last 2024 where it's blank is an invitation. It's an invitation in terms of what's next, just like your films invite us to think about what could be possible. And I hope one day that you and I will dismantle that frame and fill it in. That's
oh my gosh, I would love that. I would welcome that. I think that these kind of moments, they're challenging because they challenge you on where do you want to step up and what can you do. I've been feeling very local. I want to get very local, but I don't want to lose the bigger picture. But since I finished that, so was it a week ago? I made a film. The film about the feminist history tree ring is called We Are Here. And we offered it as alternative programming for Inauguration Day and also to honor MLK. So we invited people to show the film and have these home screenings with discussion guides. But since I was finishing that film, and in the last days of President Biden's presidency, he declared the Equal Rights Amendment the law of the land, which women, including myself and many others, and started with the great leader Alice Paul, have been trying to get women as in the Constitution for over 100 years. Most people do not even realize that women do not have equal rights in the Constitution. The Equal Rights Amendment has been a century in the making, and it was a very big deal that happened. And of course, it was the last day of his presidency, and a lot of people are questioning what that means. But I will be working on helping to educate people what that means, because it's about now upholding it, and there'll be lots of lawsuits. But again, I think it's that back and forth, and you have to keep pushing and fighting for what you believe in, even if the whole world feels like it's going in another direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I have a question. I was thinking about this as I was, even before I watched your films, but I get your newsletter and just following you. Do you consider yourself an activist, Tiffany?
It's so funny you say that, because I had it in my bio for like a year and a half, and then I took it out. Now I just say artist. I mean, I am definitely a convener. Activist sounds angry, and all of my convenings are not from a place of anger. Maybe that I shouldn't say that, but it has a edge to it that I wrestle with that. A lot of people call me that. And I mean, listen, I've had a newsletter for over 28 years called Breakfast at Tiffany's. And often in there is a film or a piece I'm working on. And then I highlight all these things I think you should check out: books, films, podcasts. And there's definitely a point of view because I'm creating it. And I do convene. I mean, if you look at my whole career, the Webby Awards was about convening people around this new medium and celebrating and honoring them. And then all my film screenings, whether they were at Sundance or wherever they were, the film was always an invitation to have a deeper conversation about some issue and take action. So, and then even all my art openings, they're opportunities to get together and galvanize. And like, even the word galvanize sounds like a more positive word than activism. Activist, I don't know why that is. I mean, no one's ever asked me that, and I had it on, I took it off. I mean, if we define the term activist, well, let's just define it as someone that takes action. I am a woman of action. Absolutely, no question. I'm not always doing it against something. I'm often doing it to just bring people together. Like my superpower is bringing people together. And I love bringing people together. Big gatherings with thousands of people and 30 people in my home. I mean, and every Friday, my husband, fortunately, I married someone. I mean, I know this is rare. He's actually more social than me, which I can't. He could go out all the time, but we have people over to our house. We have a dinner party every Friday for Shabbat. It's an ancient Jewish ritual. We're not that religious, but we do love Shabbat deeply. And that is about gathering people around your table every single week without fail, unless you're like traveling or something. But so we gather people every week, and then a lot of times much bigger gatherings, and it gives me great pleasure, energy, a sense of meaning. There's nothing that makes me happier than bringing people together. So to answer your question in a very long way, I'm sorry about that, but it's not on my bio now, because actually the word artist, I've been doing mostly art now for the last 4 years, physical art at exhibits and such. And then on Monday, I had people, I showed some films I made years ago, some new ones. And it's really funny, at my house, somebody's like, I didn't know you were a filmmaker. I just thought you were an artist. And I laughed so hard. I'm like, oh my gosh, that was my whole life. And the term of title, actually, I feel like artist, more than any title that I've had, whether it's been film director or author or founder of the Webby Awards, like artist to me feels the most right, because to me what it says is you have a perspective and you are communicating it. Like even when I was a documentarian, I never felt like that fit, because my films are more like cinematic essays from my perspective. I wasn't trying to, actually, A Declaration of Interdependence out of all of my films was the most, like, I was trying to show like a multifaceted perspective. But normally my films, and I'm not in that movie, normally my films start with me just a little bit to give a context and to let the viewers know this is my perspective. I'm not trying to tell you everyone's, I'm giving you mine. Then I usually pop in the middle to ask a question, and at the end I ask another. I try to summarize and then and hopefully have you ask another question in your own mind. So it's very much from my own perspective. So the word artist to me seems to encapsulate all the different things I do. But then I was just at this art event yesterday, and this gallerist was like, we try to protect our artists from never have to being in the public. They just do their work and they give us the work and we show it and they don't have to do any of that. And I was sitting there thinking, well, to me, that the making of the work and then how I share it is like the other part of the artwork for me. It's my newsletter, it's my events, it's the little tree rings I hand out on my art openings for people to take home, just whether they got a piece, just to like have something to remember the artwork from or the ideas. So to me as an artist, it's all of those things.
You definitely read as an artist to me because you're constantly creating. Yeah, I actually want to go into this notion of convening because we live in a very polarized world. And one of the things I'm hoping to do on this podcast, which is very consistent with the Aspen Institute, is bringing people from different backgrounds, different political views, different perspectives on so that we can begin to see the common thread in all of us and see that we're more alike than we are different.
Yes.
How do you keep an open mind and how do you think about convening during these very polarizing times?
I've been thinking about that a lot because, yeah, I mean, I'm Jewish and it has been a really hard 16 months where a lot of my activist friends that I marched alongside on issues around reproductive rights, I really felt like I saw anti-Semitism come out that was super sad to feel when I felt like we were comrades, and then I feel that way again, like because we're focusing on our common goals. I mean, and I should say I didn't personally feel like I just saw some trends in language that was kind of lumping all Jewish people and lumping in kind of recreating some narratives that were troubling to me and that I've seen throughout history of kind of a kind of amalgamation that all Jewish people think in this one way and do these certain things. And actually, I think a lot now that DT is our president, Donald Trump, you can love America and believe in America and not agree with who's president or how things are being run. And that's very true in Israel. You can love Israel and believe and know as a Jew the history of Jews in Israel from everything we study in the Torah, the Old and New Testament. It's in there thousands of times, the Jewish people from Israel. And you cannot agree with the government. And those two things can be true. And so even the term American is like Zionist. You believe in America. You believe in the concept of Israel. You might not agree with how things are, what it's happening over there, but you don't stop. I am not stopping to believe in America because I don't believe in the government. I mean, this is a messy experiment and it needs everyone to still believe in the vision of what that country means, whether it's America or Israel. So to go back to your question of how do you stay connected? So I've been feeling, as soon as Kamala started running, I felt an amazing united front again with everyone to hopefully elect Kamala. Now, she didn't win, but here I am in San Francisco, California. It's been Art Week all week. I have felt a sense of unity and love and like connectedness I haven't felt in a long time. And I think because we have common shared values, how do we focus on what we do believe in? And I have a lot of people on my newsletter. It's around 40,000 people, and they don't all agree. Yeah. I've had it since I started the Webbies, 28 years. So, and I respond to everybody, and it sometimes takes me a really long time because you can imagine and it's so interesting, like some newsletters just get I get hundreds of responses. And like after the election, I put out this, one of my favorite Rumi poems was "There's a field, I'll meet you there."
Oh, I love this. It's one of my favorites too. I love that poem.
I just put out, I think I must have gotten 400 responses, and I spent 2 days responding to everyone because there were people, because I have someone in my family, it's not my husband, he wants me to say that from now on, that voted for Trump in my immediate world. And it's been challenging. It's been challenging. And I keep trying to focus on what we agree on. And a lot of times this is someone I love talking to. I love talking to this person. And yet the last couple months, there's usually a moment where I will go, I'm trying to do it quicker this time. I both want to hear what she's thinking. I do. I want to know why she thinks the way she does, because it doesn't make sense to me, but I'm trying to understand. And then on the same time, I try to redirect the conversation to what we do agree upon and what we enjoy talking about. But then there's usually a moment where I'll go, we can't go there. We come from such different perspective that it's not worth our relationship. Like, I love you more. I love you
Out of
more.
mutual respect and love, I'm not going to go there. Yeah.
Yeah. And we look at different news sources, so we can't send each other news clips anymore. It's just news links. It's not productive, because would you rather love me or be right in this moment in your mind? And it's working. I mean, it's tough though. So it's the first time. The last time we went through this in 2016, I did not have someone immediately in my life. So that, I think it's been good for me, actually, because I am forced to wrestle with it all the time. And I mean, the other thing that worries me, and especially as someone who early on with the internet just saw this as this incredible potential to connect people, but back then it was more like Wikipedia still is the example to me of like the ultimate, like everyone collaborating on information. But that's been like politicized and a lot of things. But the manipulation of information and what people see, and the business model structure being such that it wants you to like stay on and sending you more sensational, polarized information.
Yeah. It's driving us to the polar extremes.
Exactly. So, and I see some of the links that I see the algorithm, and that's why, I mean, I turn off all screens one day a week. And it's literally, I feel like every week, like tonight, it's Friday. I cannot wait to go offline. It'll happen in like whatever, 5 hours. And I feel like I turn off the internet. I turn off what everyone else is trying to make me think or look at, or notifications or like or comment on or respond to. And I'm like, Ken and I have people around the table. We make a nice dinner. We set the table with a tablecloth. We have a really wonderful conversation. One conversation around the table that's kind of led. It's like a Thanksgiving every week. It's like, what are you grateful for? What are you thinking about? And then the next day I spend a lot of time journaling. We spend a lot of times with our dog in the mountains, just hanging out. It's a very quiet day. It's very reflective. And I get, first of all, my best ideas happen then, but I think I get the perspective that I lose by being online. I lose perspective being online because it's never ending. There's no bottom to the scroll. There's no moment to stop. I saw somebody post something that was made me laugh so hard. It's like, my mind is like the internet with too many tabs open, 4 are frozen, and I don't know where the music's coming from.
That's hilarious. It's so funny. You know, Tiffany, this is something that I didn't know that we shared until you encouraged me to watch Tech Shabbat. And I will also share with you, because we're using this podcast to also get to know each other better. But I grew up in a community that had a lot of Jewish people. So I grew up with a lot of Jewish friends. I was born in Montreal, actually in a Jewish community. My parents have always had a lot of Jewish friends. And then now I still have a lot of Jewish friends. Like, I joke that I've probably been to synagogue more than I've been to church.
Have you ever done a 23andMe?
I know I did. And I have some Ashkenazi in me.
I mean, it's like, you probably have some in you if you're like naturally.
I do. And I just feel very comfortable. And I love the Jewish community. I love Shabbat dinner. I mean, we never say no when we get invited to Shabbat dinner.
Oh, it's the best. I mean, it's such a beautiful tradition. It's like, have people over every Friday night. That's what it's instructed.
It's so beautiful. I never heard it described as Thanksgiving every week, but that's spot on. And the thing that we shared that we briefly touched on it when we were prepping for the podcast is this notion of technology, our relationship to technology.
Right, because you have had a big career in tech.
25 years. So I was literally part of shepherding everybody coming online.
Right. Me too. You and I were both the handful of women.
That's right. Because and I want to get to the Webbies in a second, because that's a big deal. And I want to make sure our audience understands what the Webbies are. But so I was becoming an executive in tech during the so-called connected era.
So what year was that?
I started in tech in 99, and I left as CMO of IBM in 22.
Wow. So you just saw all those waves, Web 1, Web 2, the crash, Web 2,
totally.
Web 3.
All of it. And, I saw us becoming disconnected during the so-called connected era. I mean, I saw it cut both ways, to be honest, because I saw emerging markets gaining technology. My kids would not have met my grandparents had it not been for the ability to have a Skype call. So there, I saw the blessings of it, but, and you and I have talked about this, but we don't do it every week, but we did do it for 6 months as a family. We unplugged for 6 months. And
what was that like?
I mean, the change in all of us. So the first thing that I remarked upon was, I thought our son was becoming kind of like a moody teen.
How old was he at this point?
He was 13. And he was kind of going through the grunt phase, what I call the caveman phase that boys go through. They go through this phase where everything is. And so I thought that was starting. But within 24 hours of us being off devices, I saw my son come back. Suddenly he was making eye contact and engaging and laughing and cracking jokes and playing with his sister. And we were all kind of coming back to life. And the other thing, I was in my early 40s and starting to have trouble sleeping. And every doctor was telling me it was perimenopause and it was hormonal. I'll tell you what, as soon as I gave up that device, I started to sleep like a champ. I slept through the night.
And I sleep so much differently on the one night. By Friday night, I sleep my best night's sleep of the week, for sure.
So you noticed too. Yeah, because it's affecting your adrenals. It's affecting everything, the light, as you talk about in Tech Shabbat. So, I mean, I feel very passionately about this, that there's such value in a digital detox. And you don't have to unplug for 6 months and travel the world like we did.
Yeah, I mean, I love that you did that. I really want to take my family on the Grand Canyon. And I've done it on a river rafting trip, and I've done it a couple times in my life. It was both times the best trip of my life, because you're unplugged for 10 days and you go, I think it looks like the big vagina of the earth. You're going through the folds of the earth, and you're just deeper and deeper. Every little fold looks different.
I'm not going to be able to see that now.
Whenever you're looking at, Zion or like Grand Canyon. Anyways, but it was such a profound experience every time I went. And I really want to take my family. But I'll tell you, I ended up writing if any of your listeners are like, how do I do that? What do I do? And after we started doing what we call our Tech Shabbat, I've been doing it for 15 years now, so it just keeps getting deeper and deeper. But when I was nearing a decade of doing it, and I was watching, here I was feeling this amazing benefit of unplugging every weekend. Everyone was getting more and more addicted, and I was like, I have to write a book about it. And actually, I had always wanted to write a book about creativity and making things happen and convening, and I just like put it aside. I'm like, this feels urgent, that I need to share this very ancient practice that's free. It's been around for thousands of years, like kind of like yoga and meditation, which are two things I engage with, but I'm not, from those cultures. I thought, here's a Jewish idea that I think is the best idea of the Jews, the fourth commandment. You must take a day of rest. It's above, honor thy mother, thy father. It's above on the list of the best, if you look at the 10 commandments as ways to live, good ways to live, it's pretty high on the list. And we have never needed it more. And we have created an infrastructure in our world where we're supposed to be available and connected 24/7. So I ended up calling the book 24/6 to kind of de-religiousize it from, it's like, I do talk about Shabbat and Jewish history, and I have great love and respect for the ritual of it. But I wrote it in a way that like anyone can engage with this idea, just like you can do yoga and meditate. And it's been really exciting. It's been out for like 5 years now, just people from different cultures that have brought it into their lives. And then I kind of I both talk about the history of time on and time off, and I make a lot of films about neuroscience. So I was personally very interested in why I seem to have my best ideas on Saturday. They just always come on Saturday. It's like I'm turning off the world and I'm turning on my best brain. And I feel grateful. Oh, I mean, this is an interesting thing. You know, when you're on the internet, you're just like wanting the next news feed and next headline, the next email. Like, so as you're reading an email, you're like, I want another email. I want another thing. I want. And that's designed that way. And then I turn off the screens on Friday night, and suddenly it's like I exhale, and suddenly I'm like looking at what I have. And I, instead of wanting, I feel immense gratitude for what's right in front of me. And I am of want of nothing. I am so grateful for whoever's around my table, for my husband, for my children, for my animals, my plants. I notice things I don't see because there's nothing to distract me. And it's just such a beautiful reconnection with myself. I mean, I love connecting with myself on Saturday. That's when I'm doing my journaling. It's like I'm making an appointment with myself to think about what I'm thinking about, and I journal. What happened this week? What things that I'm trying to make happen did I move forward? What would upset me? What made me laugh? And I try to recount it all, and it's this delicious unfolding of my week in this way where I have time and space to think. So I love that you spent 6 months. I mean, I'm sure you're going to look back on that period for the rest of your life as this magical time. I mean, actually, I know so many people went through a hard time during COVID. And I felt like it was a gift for my family. It was right before my daughter it was the year before she was going to college. And we spent so much time together. And it felt like when we've said, we'll look back on that time, you know, it wasn't like the whole period of COVID, but those first 3 or 4 months, we really were starting to do everything differently. And it felt like a gift of the whole world kind of stopping the way it was existing and looking at how you wanted to live.
I couldn't agree more. And I know that there was a lot of suffering during that time, but it did feel like a stolen moment. And it did feel like
Stolen
things,
moment. That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
yeah, and it felt like things slowed way down.
Yeah.
And even like the vibration of the world. It's fascinating. At the time, we don't live there anymore, but at the time we lived near a highway and it had a train that ran through the middle of it. And the house would vibrate a little bit. Like I was really sensitive to the fact that I could feel the vibration, and it stopped during COVID. We got a total reprieve, and I could hear birds, and I could hear it stopped. And I remember reading an article about the fact that seismologists were realizing that the vibration of the earth had stopped because there weren't cars and trucks and airplanes, and there wasn't the same amount of travel. So when everything first got shut down, literally the earth stopped vibrating in that same way, in terms of they were picking up the low hum. And I thought, what is that doing to our nervous systems? So yeah, I feel like there was a lot of suffering, but where there's dark, there's lightness too. And it was just, I agree, it was such a gift in many ways. And in many ways, I don't think we fully comprehend how it impacted us yet.
Well, I think that I have been pretty stunned about how much it changed the way people work. I mean, to this day, like as a working mom, you know, at my film studio, and the Webbies, well, actually, when I had kids, that's when I sold the Webbies. So it was always my film studio, which was like, whatever, 20 years. We only went in Tuesdays and Thursdays because that was best for me with my kids. So it was always a 2-day-a-week company. And then it has been kind of wild to see how much it's radically changed the way people work. Now, during COVID, a lot of people were bringing, like my book, 24/6 is for the individual, but a lot of companies were having me come and speak about, because everyone was so burned out from being on the screens, to talk about kind of 24/6 with companies, because, you know, people shouldn't be emailing on the weekends. Like I'm a big proponent of like scheduled send emails and giving your employees a break on the weekends so they can relax, which is what they're supposed to do to recharge. But a lot of people were, you know, letting their employees come in whenever they wanted, and like 1 or 2 days. And I think that's a recipe for disaster, because going back to convening, people need people. And I believe if you're going to have people come in, have them all come in on the same day, Tuesdays and Thursdays, whatever it is, that you are like my friend recently. I saw her, she goes, I'm getting an office again. I'm like, why? You know, like I knew she was like using a shared, like communal cool space in the city. She was like, I'm missing the joy of being around people and the funniness that happens when you're in person. And I get that. So I'm super curious what's going to happen. I've actually heard 3 people mention that their offices are requiring 5 days, or like what's going to be in this next phase. And I know that Elon Musk, who's now in charge of some department in the government, requires his employees to do that. Is he going to try to, make that happen? I don't know, but I think the reason I only went on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I think my team loved it, was so I could be a present mother as well as working in the world. And so, but I think that has been like a lasting thing. I was not expecting, like, any woman who worked at a corporate job. Like, I'm curious, when you were at IBM, were they flexible when you had young kids on where you worked? No.
Well, because of the role that I was in, I was actually on a flight to Armonk every week. So I worked in New York. I'm based in Austin. So I worked in New York Monday through Thursday. Every week I was on a flight. And I was the most tested I joke that I was one of the most tested individuals on the planet. So I was having to take a PCR test before I got on the plane, once I landed, because we were all convening. So I was the CMO of IBM during COVID. So that was the other kind of element in all of that, which was crazy. But
what about before COVID? Would you go in every day?
Well, no, I became the CMO during COVID. So I don't know what it looked like before COVID.
But before you became the CMO, did you have to go in every day?
Yes. When I was at NI, yes. And at Dell, not so much. Dell was one of the leaders in terms of remote work, but because it's such a global company, which is what takes me to my point that I want to make around this. I don't know if you know Priya Parker. She wrote this great book called Gathering with Intent.
Art of Gathering.
Yeah, Gathering with Intent.
Gathering.
And I am a big fan of Gathering with Intent. And it's actually something that I employed long before COVID, which is, if you're going to bring people into the office, you have to have an intent behind it. Because if you're bringing everybody in to just sit on Zoom calls with all their global counterparts, it makes no sense.
No sense.
And so while from my perspective, it's whether you're hybrid or whether you're in the office 5 days a week, none of that really matters. What's important is, are you being intentional about it, to your point? And that's implicit in what you're saying.
Yeah, that's right.
Your team wanted you there Tuesdays and Thursdays. So they knew you were going to be there Tuesdays and Thursdays, or something intentional.
So we planned around that. We had all of our in-person brainstorming. We'd have I think even a producer that I worked with for 18 years who I adored, and then he, during COVID, moved to Maine to be near his family. So then we were remote for 4 years. And then he went back to graduate school last April, and I really thought about who's going to work with me to replace him, because he was like the other lobe of my brain. And there's this wonderful woman that worked with me, Lauren Schiller, when I had the feminist history training in DC, and she's local. And we have so much, even though we work a lot remote, like once every couple of weeks, we're in person, and we always have so much fun, and we laugh, and I want that. I want that.
Me too. In fact, my office doesn't have a desk. It has a round table. And I'm almost manifesting a team, because I want to collaborate with people. I don't want to be by myself, staring at a screen all day, sitting on my ass.
It is about, I love that it's like intentional gathering at work. That's what it needs to be. And
yeah. Okay, can we talk about the Webbies? Because that's a big deal. And I want, not all of our audience comes from our industry. So, as a marketer, I coveted a Webby, and so I know what the Webbies are. But tell us about the Webbies. How did that come about? How did you found it? And tell our audience what the Webbies are.
Okay, the Webby Awards, like the Oscars of the internet. They're in their 29th year. They happen in New York every year. It's a big, who's who in the tech industry, and lots of people getting awards and being honored, and really anyone that's pushed the medium forward in some way. And I was in my 20s. Well, first of all, I was always interested in technology. So back then it wasn't cool. Like, it's hard to imagine before the web, if I can put us in a time machine and remember when it was the 80s, and I had an Apple IIc with my brother. We were super into this computer that didn't connect anywhere but was on our desk. And then when the Mac came out, I was absolutely obsessed in 1984, and I was in the school newspaper, and I was one of the people that converted our paper and tape, printing of the newspaper, to the computer.
Wow.
Yeah. And then, my friend and I, she was Iranian, my family's from Ukraine. both these enemy countries. It was Russia at the, now it's called Russia. And we wrote this program when we were 17. We wrote a proposal for a concept called Uniting Nations in Telecommunications and Software. And it was this vision of when all these computers on the desk could be connected. And of course, it was way too early. But from that, I was invited to be a student ambassador in the Soviet Union in 1988 to talk about the power of computers. It was right after high school, before I went to UC Berkeley. I'm like talking about the power of computers. Of course, they were like in food lines. They're not thinking about computers. My first bubble was burst at that young age. But then I went to UC Berkeley. I started making films. And the way I would pay for my films is I was working in CD-ROMs, which at the time was like the big thing. It was, again, I want all the listeners to imagine a world before the web, before anything was connected. And CD-ROMs were like this very big thing. So I was like making a CD-ROM to pay for one of my films. And somebody was like, Tiffany, you have to see this thing called the web. It's a website and people all over the world are connecting on this thing called the website. And I looked at that and I was like, it's here. That's what I was writing about in high school. It's going to change the world. And at the time, I was working for the Web magazine, which was chronicling the early days of the web.
What year was this, Tiffany? Just to kind of give us perspective.
Now we're talking, it's like 96.
Wow. Yeah. Early days.
Oh, yeah. And then they owned the Webby Award trademark. And they're like, we don't have any budget. I'm like, I'm an independent filmmaker. I know how to do lots of things without any budget. I see the vision of what the web's going to be. It's going to change the world. I want everyone to know about it. And I was, in my 20s and created this very edgy award show. We had a 5-word acceptance speech. We honored all the early pioneers in the internet. And it was just like right place, right time, lots of hard work. I was like you, a rare woman in tech. So it was just this explosion of it was like riding a rocket ship. And the first event, there was press around the world there. And what is this thing called the web? And I was like explaining to people what it is. And then we had judges and then the Web magazine folded. And then I spun out the Webbies, which were very successful that first year, into its own business unit as a part of IDG, which is International Data Group. And then New York tried to bring it to New York from San Francisco. And there was a battle between the cities for it. And we kept it in San Francisco. And we'd have it at like the San Francisco Opera House with like sold out crowds of 3,000 people. And I had performers rappelling from the ceiling. And I would make these little films. Like, remember, I was a filmmaker that was just working in tech, like simultaneously. But I got to make all these kind of short films that would introduce the show. It would like show on the screen and in between each category. And they were these little short films to show how I thought technology was changing that aspect of your life.
Gosh, you were shaping. That's fascinating to me, Tiffany. Okay, so you are in essence doing what you're doing today with a really critical audience of people that were shaping
this new medium
world, online. And you were shaping them and creating an experience for them.
And it's convening and honoring and creating a community and that would see each other every year. When I was running, so this was like the first wave of the web. This is like what they call Web 1.0. And it was very much the Wikipedia, the kind of beautiful ideas of what it could mean to connect ideas. Then all the corporations started coming in. Okay, we are going to make lots of money from this new medium. And then suddenly, and I used to be at the time the internet expert for Good Morning America. So they would fly me in from San Francisco to Times Square once a month. And I would explain this unusual thing called the web. And I always used to wear funky knots in my hair. And I was like this person from the future coming from San Francisco. And I remember I have this one episode where I'm like, they're manipulating. Well, at the time, the big concern was spam. Okay, so it's so funny. It was like the first moment of like technology manipulating what you saw and what you didn't see over email. And I remember raising like a flag going, somebody's affecting what you're seeing. And then that's when I saw the first, like this could turn really bad. And I think what we're seeing today in 2025 is that, and it's not the whole tech industry, and I really want to underscore that. I know it feels like all the tech titans have turned towards money and greed and manipulation, but it is not everyone. And it's 4 or 5 individual, very big leaders in it, but it's not everyone. And I really want to say that because I don't want the narrative to be like anyone in tech is creating this polarization and the algorithm's gone mad and all this stuff. But what we are seeing now is the manipulation of like, you know, I remember the moment when they started saying, we need to create sticky websites. We're going to stick you there. And that's when all the companies started building business models to keep you on the screen all the time. And then in 2005, when the iPhone was invented, suddenly it's with you all the time. You never had a break. And that's when I really started to see my brain change. And I do make a lot of films about neuroscience. I stopped being able to focus and concentrate in the way I used to. And I was very good at focusing. And I really attribute it to the phone combined with all these business models that never wanted to have you leave looking at it. And that was the next year my father died kind of dramatically quickly. And I was like, okay, I don't want to live this way. And, you know, when someone dies or you find out you're very ill, and it's one of those wake up moments. And like my father died, my daughter was born within days of each other. And I was like, I want to change the way I'm living. I don't feel good. I don't need any research. And again, this was before anyone was talking about digital detox, or there was no language for what was happening, but I just didn't feel good. And my husband had lived in Israel, and the whole country shuts down for Shabbat. The whole country, no buses run, nothing. And we started doing Tech Shabbat, where we turned off the screens. And that's when I felt I got my brain back. I got my soul back. And every week, no matter how intense or stressful, I'm not saying it's all bad. Like, I release films, I release artwork on the web. I laugh. I have my Instagram feed where it's usually things that make me laugh or inspire me. So I've really trained the algorithm to really what I want to see on there. I don't want to get my news from there. And it's not all bad. It's just all too much. And it shouldn't, our brains were not designed to be on all the time. We need to turn it off and to turn on what we're thinking on our own, what we're feeling. We need to sit with ourselves in silence, in reflection, and we've created a world that leaves no space to it. So I think, you know, it takes courage to say, I'm turning the world off, and telling your friends and family, one day a week, you're not going to be able to reach me. We actually have a landline, but no one uses it. It's just like, one day a week, we lived that way before, where we weren't available every second.
Yeah. And no one, yeah. Yeah. I always say we're not brain surgeons. You know, there are people that probably listen to this podcast that are, but thankfully we're not. And no one's going to live or die based on a delayed response from us.
Well, even my father, who was a surgeon who operated on the brain, he would, and actually passed away from brain cancer, which was like,
oh my goodness.
Well, because he knew what was happening. So it was such an unusual experience to have him, who had studied and written about and operated on the brain, know where his tumor was, know what was happening. And
so he self-diagnosed?
He did not self-diagnose, but he, you know, with glioblastoma, which is brain cancer, when they give you a diagnosis, it is exactly correct. He was given a 9-month diagnosis. It was the week I found out I was pregnant.
Oh, Tiffany.
He died and she was born within days. It was
so sorry.
Oh my God. Thank you. It was actually a real gift, again, from a hard period, because he knew what was happening, and he knew his speech was going to shut down. He knew all the things. He was like, I would go over there and we had such incredible conversations. And my film that I know you mentioned you're going to watch maybe this weekend, Connected, is a lot about those 9 months and my bigger thoughts about connectedness. But
can we take a moment to talk about your dad?
Yeah.
I'd love to hear more about him. I mean, who is the man behind this amazing woman before me?
Well, he was, and my mom. I have two. My dad's no longer. He's with me in a totally different way now. And my mom, also, who's still alive and really paved a big path as far as having her own career. But my dad was incredibly special. We were really close. He was brilliant. He wrote books. He was a surgeon. Oh, wait, actually, before I tell you about him, I was going to tell you this one thing. He, who really was a surgeon for life and death, every other weekend, he would go on call with another surgeon. So he got a break. Like even people that hear my talks on my tech Shabbat would say, well, what if here or this? I'm like, my father had somebody he would be on call to, which means I'm sure there's a network in what you do. If you think your job is so important, if your job is so important, there's probably someone you could be on call to one day a week. So you could take a break to recharge and replenish so you can give back the best way. But going back to my father's name was Leonard Shlain, and he was just an incredibly special Renaissance man. So he was a surgeon, and then he also wrote about goddess culture. He taught me a lot about feminist history.
Wow.
And he really believed women were more powerful. There's no doubt. He was like, "You make babies, you make life," and he wrote a whole book called "The Alphabet versus the Goddess," which was all about his big question was what event kept happening in every civilization that changed the sex of God from female to male? What was it? And it was a New York Times bestseller. People write to me about it all the time still. That's The Alphabet versus the Goddess. And then he wrote this other book. His first book was called Art and Physics, Parallel Visions in Space, Time, and Light. And he was talking about how physicists and scientists were all talking about their big breakthroughs were the same ideas. One was with images and one was with equations. And it's actually how I met my husband, because my husband was a young professor at UC Berkeley, and it was his favorite book. And he heard the author was speaking in San Francisco, and he had just moved here. And he went up to my dad. He's like, "Oh, Dr. Shlain, I'm a huge fan of art and physics. I'm an artist and a scientist, and here's my book. I just moved here. I'm a new professor at UC Berkeley." And my dad was like, "Have you met my daughter, Tiffany?" And I was standing right behind him, and we met and we fell in love that moment. And my dad introduced us. It's very old school. And what's super beautiful about that story, not only that we've been together for since 1997, but that 3 years ago, out of the blue, we got an email from this wonderful curator in LA who was like, the Getty Museum is doing this initiative, and the theme is art and science. And will you two write a proposal for an exhibition? Because we both do work around art and science. So we have a show that's up in LA right now called Ancient Wisdom for a Future Ecology, Trees, Time, and Technology. And it's at the Skirball Cultural Center until March 2nd for any of your listeners. But it's so much a manifestation of my father's book and the reason I met my husband. And like, he's so with me in that show.
So beautiful. And is that the first time you've collaborated with your husband?
No, it's the biggest thing we've ever done. We've co-written a lot of movies together about robotics and science and technology and Jewish themes. We made a film called The Tribe, but we did a couple art installations together, but they were like, this is by far, I mean, it's like there's 10 artworks in it, 2 video art pieces, AI, 8 sculptures, and it was very scary, with the fires. The fires were very close to the museum, and so many people. Oh my gosh, it's been so intense on how many people have lost their homes, but hopefully there's going to be some big events if they happen. I mean, I think they're happening. Anyone listening who's in LA, I'd love to have you come and just go to sign up for my newsletter and you'll find out the details, because it's been a little bit of a moving target, but we're doing some events around the Frieze Art Fair, some tours, and then on February 2nd, we're doing some events there, and then that exhibit will travel. So it's been really great to work on it with Ken, and I think about my dad so much. And then my mom, like when you watch some of my other films, she's a psychologist, and she went back to school. She was of the generation where a lot of women felt like they had to get divorced and to have their own careers. So when I was 8, my parents got divorced, and my mom went back to school to get her PhD in psychology, and is a psychologist. And a lot of my films both look at the neuroscience, the psychology of issues, and I really think they all have a positive psychology framing to them. But her interest in why we do the things we do on an individual level, and then my father really looked at why society has changed on a large level. So those two perspectives from each of my parents really has informed all of my work on the very intimate and then the bigger trends and shifts that happen.
Wow, you sound like such an amalgamation of both of them.
Totally. I mean, I find psychology so interesting. And yeah, I mean, I think even my films about neuroscience, like I'm interested in the actual science of why things happen in your brain. And then, like this film I just made on the teen brain, I wanted teens to know why they felt a certain way. Because I think when you were talking about your son, that caveman age, like grunting and monosyllabic and just one word answers, I think it's, there's so many new things happening in their brains. And they don't have words for it yet. They're like, I'm feeling all of these new things. Well, their brain is completely restructuring itself, and communicating becomes either, or they'll have an outburst because they don't even know how to articulate what's happening, but you think they're being really rude, or but really they're just like trying to process. They're overloaded with a new feeling from a new infrastructure in their brain.
Yeah. It's fascinating. I almost want you to do, just as an aside, a film on menopause brain and
Oh,
do like the same one for
I
menopause.
definitely, that will be my
Uh,
next
yeah,
film.
but
Yeah.
I and the effects of hormones on the brain, because you talk a little bit about it in Teen Brain. I think what's also super interesting about that short film, Tiffany, is you are speaking to both the teenager, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my perception was that you were speaking to both the teenager and the rest of society. Like you were saying to them, you were normalizing to them the experience of, hey, this is the science behind why you're feeling the way that you feel. And oh, by the way, hey, everybody else, cut them a break.
Exactly. That this is totally, well, that is what I was trying to do, both speak to the teens and to reframe. I mean, it helped me as a parent of a teen to not take things so personally, because how can you not, like, somebody that's been like so cute and adorable and suddenly they're saying things to you and you're like, what? I just did that really nice thing for you. And they don't even, and it's like, I think it reframed things for me. That there's one scientific fact I was fascinated by, and anyone that has a teen or has had a teen will know, is like sometimes the very way you breathe or eat is like totally annoying to your kid. Well, biologically, that is normal. That they're trying to individuate from you and separate from you. So suddenly, biologically, they start doing all these things that you're going to annoy them just so they can leave you. Or else, before they just wanted to snuggle with you and be by your side. But unless you start annoying them, they're not going to be able to leave the house. So
Yeah.
it's like it's a reframe for the teens and for the parents, and it's an exciting time because as a filmmaker, going back to the beginning of our conversation, like some of my favorite films are able to capture the feeling of like teenage, the first love, your first kiss, the first time you tried something big and did it. Like there's a line that Ellen Galinsky, a psychologist, makes in the film. People make movies to try to recreate the big feelings of teenagedom, and like, so that's an incredible time to be alive. You're learning how to be brave. You're taking a lot of risks. You're having all these big feelings. And a lot of people feel numb. I mean, people in my life that I feel like are not in a good place are just, they don't feel alive, and they feel numb to the world, and they're probably online too much, and they're not feeling alive. They're not feeling the big feelings. They're feeling deadened.
That was totally me. That was me. I mean, I'd cut myself off from my heart and was operating from a place of mind and gut just to survive as a tech executive. And I was totally gotten to a place where I was numb. And then once I opened my heart back up and I started to go on my healing journey and eventually led to my spiritual journey, then a depression hit. And I'll never forget it. My coach said to me, well, he said two things. He said, look, you can either resist this and it's going to last a hell of a lot longer. And I said, how long? And he said, and I've seen some people, spend a decade in this place. He said, or you can lean into it and feel everything that you need to feel. And this thing will cycle pretty fast. And he said, and I have one more thing to tell you. When it's gone, you're going to miss it. And I said, what? I can't even process that. And he was right, Tiffany, because in those moments, I could cry easily. I could access love easily. The emotions, it reminded me a little bit of being a teenager. Like it was the intense feelings, and I was feeling them for the first time. And so funny enough, he was right. No, I'm not trying to go right back there, but there's something to be said for letting yourself feel the good and the bad.
I mean, I've gone through a couple depressions in my 20s. Actually, I haven't, knocking on wood, Oh, very hard times for me. I'm not. I have a lot of wood in my studio. Look, I'm like, it's right here.
Oh, yeah,
Knock
that's
on
what you're
wood.
going to show us that really quick.
This is like a tree ring that I have a lot of tree rings in my studio, but I'm like, knock on wood. Okay.
She holds up a cross section of a tree.
Yeah, but I had such hard time. I mean, the 20s are hard. They were hard for me, and I have quite a few friends that have kids in their 20s, and um, I found that there's so much I wanted to do, and and I failed really big. So wait, I forgot to tell. I missed a key part of the Webby story. Is I was coming out of a major depression, my first depression, um, for running out of money on one of my movies, and then several times on this big film I was trying to make called Zoli's Brain when I was in my 20s, right after college, and I was really working in tech to get out of debt from my film. And I was super depressed, and I was just taking any job to get out of debt and just go somewhere and not just be in bed and feel horrible like I had let everyone down by running out of money and then running out of vision on this movie. And I took a job at a CD-ROM company where I met my best friend, who's still my best friend. And she's like, "You're totally overqualified for this job." I'm like, "Please hire me. I need to." And she did. And then from there, that's when I saw the first website. And then that's around the period when I started the Webby Awards. So I was coming out of a deep depression. But why am I bringing that up? Because I absolutely think that my couple periods of being depressed in my 20s, I can taste them like they were yesterday. It gave me, I think it was really good to fail really big early in my career because it humbled me. And I think that I feel immense empathy for people going through a hard time because I can just remember it. And it was like a 3 or 4 year period where I was like in and out and in. I think I do a lot of things now. I mean, I really do feel grateful I haven't gone through one, but I do so many things now, whether it's the journaling or the Shabbat, or I do get a lot of exercise and I have a lot of community support and whatever, that I didn't have in my 20s because I was like living in Seattle by myself for the first time. And I was like, you know, you don't know enough what you need to stay in a good place. But I think depression, you can learn so much from it. And
Well, look what you got out of it. I mean, on the other side, you met a best friend, you got yourself back in financial standing, and you launched the Webbies. I mean, they
totally,
can come with gifts. So I too, you and I share this experience too. My 20s were rough, girl. And I felt like a massive loser because I had to drop out of school. I was in architecture school. I was going through a massive depression. I was having health issues.
how old were you then?
24. And I was in year 6 of a 5-year program, sort of a thing. And
Wow.
once I finally let go of it, it let go of me. And then everything opened up. Then suddenly, I got plucked out of the bar business to start my career in tech, and that just took off.
It's so funny. I think I was around, yeah, 24. I was definitely depressed. And I think, actually, for any of your listeners with perhaps kids around that age, I just ran into a friend of mine whose daughter is a psychologist now. And I said, "What is she focusing on?" She said, "quarter century issues." And I was like, "What is that?" "Oh, the 20s." And I was like, "Is that a term? They have a term now." Like, I think we went through quarter of a century issues because there's so much expectation. There's a net that's gone. I think it's a really hard time if you're not, I mean, it's not for everybody, but I think it can be a really hard time.
Yeah, I have a friend that says that period of time in our lives is about exploring and figuring out who you want to be and trying on different lifestyles and values for size. And for some people, it's super fun and wild, and for some people, it's super rough. And for me, it was rough, and it sounds like for you, it was too.
But I wouldn't change it. I mean,
No.
now again, I think my success today, I appreciate it so much. Like I remember in my 20s just being like, well, even creatively, like sometimes like having an idea in my head and I had this creative block on this film and what was coming out on the film wasn't what was in my head. And after doing it and doing it and doing it, it gets closer and closer. And now usually when I set out to make a film, there's always a moment of darkness in any filmmaking process, but it ends up how I want it to be. And that just takes years of, I've made like 34 films. That's taken years and years of practicing my craft. And now what's really exciting with all the artwork that I'm doing which is like kind of 80% of my time right now, is I love learning. I'm in the beginner's mind. Like, how am I going to make a tree ring? How am I going to learn pyrography? And it's so exciting to me. And now I feel like, okay, I know how to do pyrography, and now I want to tackle this other challenge for a physical art piece. And it's woken up my brain, because also there's something about mastering a craft and then the excitement of trying something new. So to be at this stage of my career and kind of move mostly into having art exhibits and making physical sculptures and light boxes, and it's super fun. And feels so different than when you're younger, because you have done something. And I think that's probably like, even with my art career, I know that I didn't enter it like a artist starting, because I had a career that I was coming from, and I worked fucking hard for that career, the Webbies and my filmmaking career and all my years at Sundance. It's actually really interesting because Art Week, which is in San Francisco, is the same week of Sundance. And for years, I premiered films there. It's my whole community is at Sundance right now as we speak. And I had to make a choice of where I was going to be this week. And I am here with the art world. And I wish they didn't happen on the same week, because they both are really important to me. But I don't want to have to choose. That's why artists, it's like artists encapsulate, yeah, I make films, I make art, I do things, but sometimes the world makes you choose, like on this week.
Well, I have a friend though also says a different friend that says life is not binary, and maybe there's a week where you can actually go to both. I'd like to think that
I
maybe
would
you would do
love
both.
that. I would love that.
Yeah, you would have to
My
pick.
mentor was like, "Are you going to be here? I want you to come to the women's brunch." I was just like,
Yeah.
"Yeah."
Tiffany, what now? So you've just completed this amazing body of work. Most recently a short film, We Are Here. What's next for you?
Well, it was really exciting that this exhibit that my husband and I did, that's in LA, it's called Ancient Wisdom for a Future Ecology, is going to travel. So that's very fun, because a lot of times you spend a lot of time on an art exhibit and then but it's going to go to another, I can't say where yet, but it's going to go somewhere very exciting. So that whole exhibit that we spent 3 years on will be in a new venue in a different location, which is exciting. And then I really am excited. You're seeing me in my studio right now. I have so many new ideas I want to do with light boxes and sculptures. And I want to have some days of no meetings. And I've had a very stressful period of time because I worked a lot on the election, and then this start to the year has been a lot. So I'm looking forward to just some time to experiment with some new ideas. And I'm working on a big outdoor memorial for a museum that hasn't been announced yet. That'll be the first time I'm taking my work, like specifically designing it. Like, whereas the feminist history touring traveled to the National Mall, so it was in a kind of monument space, I'm actually going to be creating a memorial inside of a forest, and that's going to be a whole new challenge. And I'm really excited about delving into that and figuring it out.
What's so cool, and I didn't realize, I don't know if you said it here or in one of your films, but I didn't realize, or I never thought about the fact that most monuments are for men by men. So the fact that you're starting to get into the world of monuments is
Yes.
really exciting to me.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's such like, trees to me are so feminine too, and like they create life from their very being.
Yeah. Well, I have very much enjoyed getting to know you. I cannot wait to see and hear about your next work. For audience members, what's the best way for them to follow what you're doing and to
I
subscribe
think
to
just
your
going,
newsletter?
yeah, TiffanyShlain.com, and my last name is just spelled Shlain. So TiffanyShlain.com, you can sign up for my newsletter, and it goes out once a month, and I kind of share both other people's work and what I'm working on. That's the best way. I mean, I'm on Instagram and all that, but again, the problem with all of those social channels is you don't own them and you don't control who sees what. So I'm a big believer in the old-fashioned newsletter as a way to stay in touch. So
Yeah. And I should mention, one of the cool things about your newsletter, you just said it now, is that it's not just about you. You take a moment to really lift others up and shine a light on other people that are doing phenomenal work that aligns to what you're
that's
doing.
right. Yeah, and in some ways, that very much, I feel like, goes back to my Webby Awards work, which was really shining a light on people doing good work. So I think I love doing that. I love lifting up important work. And I'm excited to share on my newsletter our conversation and your incredible podcast. I had a chance to listen in preparing for this to you having so many wonderful conversations with women and men. And I think it's just a gift to go deeply into someone's life. And you're so wonderful at the way you ask the questions and sharing your own story, which I think makes people they feel connected, which is what I think everybody wants.
Well, thank you so much, Tiffany. Thank you for sharing your beautiful mind and your heart with us today. I'm so grateful, and we've got to make plans to see each other in person.
Oh my gosh, I want to come visit you in Austin.
Yes, anytime. Hosting is my love language.
Or if you're ever in San Francisco.
Okay, for sure. It's a date. All right.
Okay, lots of love to you. Bye.
Thank y'all for listening today. If you're so inclined, please follow, subscribe, download, share, all of the things so that we can keep going. We appreciate your support so much. If you're interested in learning more, go to thecoeffect.co.